more hurricane activity on the way on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 15th. Well, we're back with a bulletin. We weren't expecting it to be so long between the last one and today's. We have Tropical Depression Sean, which is still active and has been for a few days. It's limping along in the North Atlantic, and that's the only actual named storm that is currently active, but there are plenty more that could be on the way. Day 137 of Atlantic hurricane season. Of course, we've got Sean, which is a tropical depression now, and an area of interest behind it at 90%, and is likely to become a substantial tropical cyclone over the central Atlantic later in the week. In the eastern Pacific, we have two areas that we're still looking out for now on day 153 of hurricane season, a 70% to the west and a 50% further to the east. Both of these systems are looking likely to form, and both of them could have a chance of becoming both hurricanes. In the western Pacific, we've got a 40% area and the remnants of Bulletin, which are off the screen, but the 40% chance there for mainly the Gulf of Tonkin and the South China Sea, and that could become a system along that coastline there and cause lots of rainfall. To the west in the Indian Ocean, we finally have an area of interest. We've been waiting a while for one. Well, there it is, and a 40% chance for the Arabian Sea for a system that could develop later on in the week and move out over the central part of that sub-basin. Well, let's take a look at Sean right now then. It is 1,625 kilometers from Barbados, 1717 from Martinique, 1721 from Guadeloupe, 1766 from Antigua, and 2236 from San Juan, Puerto Rico. It is far out at sea still at this point, and there are no watches or warnings in effect for Sean. The National Hurricane Center expect that it will dissipate within the next 48 hours or less, and could become a remnant low very soon. It was looking very poor earlier today, but it's looking a little bit better tonight. Let's take a look at satellite imagery, and first of all, it is Sean, which is blowing up quite a bit more convection. I was looking at some visible imagery earlier on in the day. It looked like it might have been about to die off. It still might happen quite quickly, but convection is blowing up. Not so sure about the general structure of the storm though, looking rather oddly shaped, let's say, with that convection blowing up. Looks like it's just east of the center and towards the southeast. But decent cloud tops in that burst of convection just there, and that's what will keep it holding on to TD for the time being. This is Invest 94L, which is to the east of Sean. That's the 90% system. That's also blowing up one or maybe two bursts of convection there, although it doesn't appear to be over the center if it has one, but that is quite clearly getting close to becoming a tropical cyclone, and I think that will happen fairly soon. Rather broad system, so it might be taking its time to get itself together. Now this is the Invest in the Western Pacific near the coast of Vietnam and Hainan. That's the one that we've marked a 40% chance for, slowly moving towards the northwest, and that pattern trend will continue for a little bit longer, but looking pretty poor at the moment, so it's got quite a lot of work to do. This massive curtain of cloud there is the remnants of Bulletin, a very powerful, large extratropical system with approximately 80 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 950 millibars. So if you count all of these storms as one, it's still the strongest. Sea surface temperatures then, the eastern Pacific still quite warm, but a little cool spot there after Lydia, but very warm still in the Gulf of California, where we can always get some significant activity late on in the season. The Atlantic looking pretty good still, around the Caribbean particularly, still concerned about that for late season. Where Sean is and that next system, temperatures are still looking good there as well in the main development region, and a very warm spot further south there. Gulf Stream still looking decent, but the coastline off the US directly is starting to cool off. Western Pacific still got quite a lot of heat in there as well, over 30 degrees in large parts of the Philippine Sea, the southern South China Sea, and where that Invest is, it's a little bit cooler but still around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, so still decent conditions for that. Bay of Bengal still very warm, 30 degrees plus as a general rule, and in the Arabian Sea a little bit cooler but generally okay, 28 degrees or above in most spots there. The Southwest Indian Ocean looking okay in the Mozambique Channel, starting to warm up. The rest of the basin, of course, still has some catching up to do. The Australian region getting very warm now off the coast of Western Australia and the Northern Territory, above 28 degrees Celsius in a few spots, and the Gulf of Carpentaria. South Pacific Ocean also starting to creep along with those temperatures warming, particularly in Vanuatu. Compared to average, this is how it's looking. The Arabian Sea is a little bit above average, especially if that system tracks further west. Bay of Bengal slightly above, Western Pacific slightly above overall, but one or two cool spots. Eastern Pacific also has one or two little cool slots there as well, but generally well above average. And in the Atlantic, it is much warmer in the lower latitudes than in the subtropical zones at this time. Oceanic heat content is still off the charts in parts of the Caribbean Sea, extending through the Bahamas as well, so really are on full guard for a potential late season storm. Eastern Pacific still holding on to quite a bit of energy off the coast of Mexico, quite immediately off the coast there, but still decent amounts, and in the Western Pacific also looking good as it does most of the year. So let's check the computer models then. First of all, we're looking at Sean circled on the left and the Invest on the right, and the Invest is much bigger than Sean is. Interestingly, on this GFS run, Sean does survive for the whole 5-day period there and might have a little shot at regenerating slightly as it starts to recurve well to the north of Hispaniola. Also watching that Invest, of course, you can see it developing into a tropical storm there, and it struggles for the first few days, certainly within that 5-day period, but signs that it could improve later on. Eastern Pacific, we're also looking out for those two Invests, and according to the GFS and some other models as well, both of them form within that 5-day window, and the eastern one actually strengthens first and becomes a hurricane, with the western one getting close to that by the end of that 5-day period. So interesting to see there, potentially two existing storms at the same time, maybe even two simultaneous hurricanes there, which it really feels like it's quite late for that to be happening. A quick look at the extratropical remnants of Bulletin and its enormous size there, dragging across the eastern Pacific and into the Pacific Northwest region of the United States and Canada, and into Alaska eventually. Very powerful, and looking quickly down towards the South China Sea, looking towards that system there as well. It struggles for a time, but eventually it does become a tropical storm, quite compact in the end by the time we get to the 17th, 18th, that's Tuesday, Wednesday. And this is the rain profile from this particular system as well, the one that we're most concerned about for land impacts over the next 7 days. And that's because we're seeing really high rain amounts from that, and perhaps its wider storminess that's ongoing around that. Of course, very monsoonal in this region, but in some parts of the coast of Vietnam there, they could get quite a lot of rainfall, and inland into China as well, which of course was impacted significantly by Koinu just a week ago. 10 inches of rain over there in southern China, 250 millimeters, but in Vietnam possibly getting up towards 17 inches there on one coastal location. That's over 400 millimeters of rain, with some very high amounts offshore, 20 inches to the east of Hainan Island. Let's check the medium range then. This is day 5 to 10, and you'll take a look at that Invest there becoming our next storm in the Atlantic. Of course it already did, and then it's continuing there and getting stronger later on, and it does become a hurricane on that GFS run as it starts to recurve a little bit further. So indications there from the model that it is going to recurve, but we can't be too sure about that yet. There are some schools of thought still and model ensembles that are taking it over the Lesser Antilles or even into the Caribbean. Looking at these two systems then in the Eastern Pacific, really strong, that's the eastern one there, and the western one starts to get stronger as well at this point. And look at what the eastern one does, it's retreated backwards to the east and then it goes back west again. That's really spoopy, let's say. An interesting certainly pattern there with that second system as it moves west, east and then west again, and the other storm starting to rebound backwards. It's like Lydia all over again there, and starting to get rather large. Indian Ocean, interesting developments here. You can see two systems now in the moderate range, a hurricane strength storm in the Arabian Sea moving northwards, and if that wasn't headline enough, a second system becoming very powerful and small just as it approaches the coast of West Bengal, India, probably near the border with Bangladesh there. And towards the end of day 10, both of them are approaching land, with the Indian one being a major threat there as a major hurricane equivalent storm, so really serious on that 10-day period. Scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store, where we have all our usual items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request, as well as our still waiting for Hone t-shirts, which are obviously still available because Hone is a ghost. In the Scilly range then, we're looking at those three hurricanes that are active at the same time, one in the Atlantic, two in the Eastern Pacific, and the eastern one ends up moving into Mexico. The western one has second thoughts about making landfall in Mexico for another occasion there, and starts to move towards the west. So it almost felt like a Lydia Max once again there, but a little bit of a different scenario. Of course, this is very long range, and that scenario could change really rapidly. Even less confidence when you've got two storms involved, and one often influences the other. Western Pacific, not too special in the long range here, but another Balavan wannabe there, a storm that develops near the Mariana Islands and intensifies quite rapidly into a major typhoon. Not Balavan levels, but maybe category 3 there as it rounds towards the north and then northeast. But considering what Balavan actually did, you just never know what might happen. That is super long range. I wouldn't put any thought into that one just yet. And in the North Indian Ocean, watching these two storms make landfall, powerful landfall along the coast of West Bengal there into Bangladesh, and then the other system turns the other way, opposite, and turns into Oman as a significant tropical storm there. Let's try and get that intensity again as we watch it back. There it is, near hurricane strength initially, and then it does weaken a little bit. Moderate tropical storm probably around its landfall, but certainly Oman getting another tropical cyclone possibly with that run. You can talk about all of that shenanigans on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13 for tropical weather and general weather chat with members from all around the world. Well, today we go back to 1985 for a really interesting look in the Eastern Hemisphere. We had Typhoon Dot, which was peaking as a Category 5, but our featured image was Typhoon Cecil, which was about to make landfall in Vietnam as a Category 3. It killed nearly 900 along its path, so a very devastating storm and caused really high damages as well in terms of raw damages. We also had Tropical Storm Ellis, which had just formed well to the east of Micronesia, and Tropical Storm 4B, which had become known in the Bay of Bengal and was making landfall in that region. Well, back to today, and we are code blue for the current situation. In the Atlantic, the next name, which could be quite forthcoming, is Tammy. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Norma, and in the Central Pacific, it is indeed still Hone. In the Western Pacific, our next name now is Sanba, and in the North Indian Ocean, it will be Tej. I remember Sanba of 2012, which was one of the first Category 5s that I tracked in the Western Pacific for Force 13. It's like ever so long ago now. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in the Australian region is Jasper, Southwest Indian Ocean Alvaro, and the South Pacific's next name is Lola. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again on Monday night.